Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I mean, it's a neat illustration of something, isn't it? The anti-Brexit campaigners who have populated College Green have inflatable boats on the end of very long poles and comedy slogans painted on placards. They have a curiously British sense of eccentricity. The pro-Brexit protesters who've taken to populating College Green are sort of incredibly angry and largely inarticulate. Presumably, I don't know actually, but if they wear high visibility vests and scream abuse at women. I'm not suggesting that they represent all pro-Brexit people any more than Steve Bray with his inflatable boats and his comedy poles represents all anti-Brexit people, but they certainly represent something. And my challenge today, indeed it's a challenge that I accept but pass on to you immediately, is to work out how best to deal with it. I don't mean on a personal level, I mean on a professional level. How should we, and actually by that I can only take responsibility for what goes on between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. on LBC, although obviously with the exception of 1 hour, I stand four square behind and alongside all of my colleagues here, the other 23 hours of the day. But what do you do about extremists? What do you do about sort of imbeciles with megaphones? How best to report it? I started my job here more moons ago than I care to remember. I'm 47 this weekend. Can you believe that? I was only 8 when I started here. Steve Allen at the time was just approaching his 80th birthday. I started my work here when Islamist hate preachers were just beginning to become a thing. I didn't take my job as seriously then as I do now, partly because I didn't really understand it or quite know how I'd got it. But I was pretty clear pretty early that the best way to deal with those clowns was to point at them and laugh at them. And I still believe that if we had all sustained that theory, we could have avoided a lot of the problems that have been caused by imbuing these imbeciles with a sense of menace. When that Chowdhury character first appeared on the sort of public radar, if we'd all called him out for the chancer that he so clearly is, then he wouldn't have been able to surround himself with impressionable, often mentally unstable acolytes who, in some cases, went on to do terrible things. It's almost as if we create the myth. I remember a front page of the Star newspaper claiming that Muslims wanted to turn Buckingham Palace into a mosque, and I remember digging a little deeper into that story and discovering that this was a suggestion that had been put upon a website by an organisation that boasted about 8 members. I remember when they used to ring me, I get them all mixed up, I apologise, the fellow with a hook for a hand or the one that finally got deported, they used to ring me up and start shouting at me on the radio, and after a while I sort of thought, well, get lost. There's no point doing this. Every minute that I spend talking to a screaming imbecile like you is a minute given to a screaming imbecile, a platform, someone who seeks to spread unhappiness, hatred, anger, violence. And it's moved now, hasn't it? It's morphed. We seem to have created an environment, and the media, I suspect, takes almost all of the blame for this. We've created an environment where a platform, it's a combination, I think, of pandering to extremes because of clicks. There's a fascinating piece in Tim Shipman's book. I don't know if you've read it, but it's the book upon which last night's Channel 4 extravaganza was based. James Graham's Brexit film last night, garnering astonishingly good reviews this morning. I've watched some of it, but not all of it. I shall withhold. No, I won't withhold comment. What I've seen so far is amazing, absolutely brilliant, and finally recognises that the real architects of Brexit were these deeply Machiavellian and sinister manipulators of fact, like Dominic Cummings. But there's a line in there about why the BBC gave so much coverage to views that were originally extreme and unpopular. And the answer was it's newsy. The head of news explains if you've got a consensus on something and there's somebody on the fringes shouting disagreement with the consensus, then that's newsy. I completely disagree with that. I'm making a speech on the subject on Friday, actually, so if you say anything clever to me today, don't be offended if I nick it and pass it off as my own by the end of the week. But that's not newsy, is it? That's the business of lynch mobs and kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the business of bonfires, trying to attract attention regardless of the validity or the importance of what it is that you're saying. So you stick someone like Anjem Choudhury on the telly, or some football hooligan who's tried to remould himself as a defender of I don't know, Albion, as in the old name for Britain, not West Bromwich, and because they generate heat. That's it. It's heat rather than light, isn't it? It's why you get tin pot fascists being given a season ticket on Question Time, because the people who generate heat, who almost always have very, very little understanding of the issues they claim to believe in. This is how we've ended up with Brexit, of course. It's as if generating heat has become more valuable than generating light. And that's a massive problem for our democracy, because what you have now is half-wits in high-visibility vests screaming abuse at elected parliamentarians, threatening violence, and journalists getting some of it as well. Obviously, in the case of Kay Burley, it's utterly, utterly unacceptable that she should receive some of the abuse that has been directed at her on College Green. Owen Jones, a left-wing journalist, in receipt of it as well. And yet there's I sense a tendency in my own profession to indulge these clowns because of clicks. Do you see what I mean? It's the difference between an exciting lie and a boring truth, isn't it? Here's a really angry person. We saw a little bit of it at the O2 when we hosted the last Speak to Sadiq event, the last Question Time for the Mayor of London, and there was a section in the crowd wearing Donald Trump hats and cheering their support for criminals and football hooligans, and pointing their phones at everybody. And they weren't interested in having a conversation. They were just interested in having their anger registered. And I'm not sure that we should be registering the anger of ignorant people, because it's built upon nothing except inadequacy and, of course, in the cases of the ones that ask you for money, self-enrichment. I don't know how to deal with the stuff on College Green today. I think one of them rang Sheila a couple of weeks ago, rang Sheila Fogarty, the desperation for attention. It's like professional trolling, isn't it? You remember when I first started coming across trolls on Twitter, and what struck me about all of them was the desperation to be noticed by people they profess to hate. It's so strange. Please notice me, James. Please notice me. Roughly translates every single negative tweet I've ever received. Please notice me. Please notice me. I really, really hate you. Now, please notice me. And it's moved from social media into the public space. I think that's why they have their phones with them, is it? Please notice me. Please notice me. And I'll film you noticing me, and then I'll feel like I matter for a minute in my special high-visibility vest. And they're pathetic. They are absolutely pathetic. They might be able to bash someone over the head with a bit or two before, without that person noticing. They might be able to inflict violence. Doesn't stop them being pathetic any more than the Islamist fundamentalists, despite encouraging and endorsing violence, were pathetic men. Almost always men. They're pathetic. And how do you deal with that? Because if I now say, give me a ring if you are one of these people, they've got what they want. It's the reason why you never heard Anjem Choudhury on any of my radio programmes. You never hear hooligans and criminals turned... I don't know how you describe these people anymore. I sort of hesitate even to say their name. You know who I'm talking about. People who will ask you for money while claiming that they're doing something of political importance. How do you properly recognise the stain that they are painting on democracy in Britain without giving them the attention they so desperately crave? And my God, they crave attention. It's so... I mean, I'm not exactly devoid of the attention-seeking gene myself, I contend, but you earn a platform historically in this country. You put in decades working in politics or in the media or in the charity sector or in activism or in academia. You become, either through effort and or expertise, you become somebody with a public platform. And some of the people who've got public platforms will make your blood curdle. Some of them will make you sing with joy to the rafters. Some of them will leave you completely cold. The point is, a public platform used to be something that you earned, for good or for ill. Now, you don't earn it. You get given it if you shout loud enough. Feel free to tell me it was always like that. I'm very much on the case this morning of trying to understand something that feels new to me. But quite often when we talk about stuff that feels new, it turns out to be anything but. That I think is your starter for 10. This notion that a public platform, media attention, used to be something that was earned. This is in the context of commentary and opinion. Obviously, if you commit a murder, you're going to get media attention. But a public platform, a media platform, used to be something that was earned. And you had to at least have a vague relationship with the truth in order to get one. You now get a public platform despite having, for example, having lied about an assassination attempt on your car. You can get a media platform after doing lies like that. That's astonishing. That wasn't true 20 years ago when I started out in this business. If you wear a chalk-striped suit and you've got a plummy accent, you'll get invited onto BBC and LBC and ITV and Channel 4, despite the fact that you are fundamentally a pathetic fraud. If you haven't got a chalk-striped suit and a plummy accent, if you've got a high-visibility vest and a smartphone, more or less the same relationship with the truth, the same relationship with common decency, but you don't have that veneer of plausibility that a public school education or a posh accent can provide, then you sort of feel you've got the right to the platform as well. If this lying racist over there can get his own TV show or his own radio show, then why shouldn't I, as a lying racist with a more estuarine accent, why shouldn't I have a place in the British media as well? So that, I suspect, is why we find ourselves where we are this morning. I still think I was right to refuse to give a platform to Islamist hate preachers or criminal hooligans, or in this case, half-wits in high-visibility vests. But does that mean that we shouldn't talk about them at all? Because if that's what you think, I've already failed. Maybe we didn't talk about them enough. Maybe we didn't laugh at them enough, historically. It was my profession that turned Amjem Chowdhury into the figure that he became. He didn't start off being a terrifying phantom. He started off being a pathetic little child. He still is, just as the half-wits in high-visibility vests are. But we imbue them with something when we react to them. And there, finally, is the question. How should we react to these half-wits in high-visibility vests? 0345 6060 973. And, if you are one of them, don't bother ringing me. Almost everything that's gone wrong in this country over the course of the last 15 or 20 years can be traced back to giving platforms to people who don't deserve them. They haven't earned them. They are not there by dint of effort or expertise. They're there by dint of shouting the loudest. It is the latest incarnation of that phenomenon that sees half-wits in high-visibility vests screaming abuse at people like Anna Soubry from the Conservative side and Owen Jones from the Labour side on College Green in Parliament. The anti-Brexit protests undertaken by Steve Bray and his friends continue to be masterclasses in mild British eccentricity. I believe they occasionally chant my name in the background of Sky News broadcasts. But the people violently demanding attention are now getting it. And I still haven't quite worked out how to play that, which is why I'm asking you. Michael is in Brentwood. Michael, what would you like to say?
Well, I wanted to say a couple of things if I can. I think you're right. It has been quite a while that this has been happening. But I also think deplatforming them is dangerous because in the social media area, you can't deplatform anyway. They'll find an outlet.
No, but that's the point, isn't it? Because they have a platform on social media, you don't need to give them a platform on proper media.
No, but the problem you have then is you give people who maybe on the edges and are not quite fully committed to some of these horrible ideas. Oh, look, but why are they hiding them? Why are they hiding them? Why aren't they allowing them to speak? Is it because they don't want us to hear the truth? It's better to confront them and shoot them down.
I used to agree with that.
Just the leader of the BNP.
Just give me one moment to put my cards on the table on that one. I used to very much believe that, and at risk of being even more self-aggrandising than usual, there aren't that many people who are better at shooting them down than I am. But it doesn't work, because what happens then is they say fake news.
No, but you can't you can't shoot Donald Trump down. But if you put proper...
But you've heard callers on this programme. I've had callers on this programme where I have said, you have seen the film footage of him doing X, Y and Z, and the caller will reply to me, that's fake news. So these people will believe whatever they want to believe. Whatever allows them to pass off their pathetic little existences as somebody else's fault is unchallengeable.
The hardcore, I agree, and I think you get that everywhere, but it's the people on the fringes. You have to chip away at the fringes and because the margin is getting wider, and we need to make the margin of these people narrower. We need to...
How do we do that then?
Well, by keep putting forward proper and reasoned arguments.
Doesn't work.
Keep talking to them.
You can't reason someone into out of a position that they haven't been reasoned into.
But the reason they haven't been into it is because they're listening to somebody who's talking like they do, saying what they say.
So you think we should have given more coverage to people like Anjem Chowdhury and Omar Bakri Mohammed?
But when he comes on, we need to shoot him down. What I was going to say is, do you remember the leader of the BNP?
Yes.
All the fuss when he went on to Question Time.
Yes.
He was made to look ridiculous in a very gentle way without anybody having a real go at him.
But that's because he wasn't very good at being a bigot.
He wasn't very good.
And now you've got people who are brilliant at being bigots who are never off Question Time, with exactly the same views, but a slightly better education, a posher accent, yellow teeth and a chalk-striped suit.
But if you argue with them, some people will listen.
It doesn't really work like that.
You have to keep going for the ones who will listen.
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to... I take your point, almost in the spirit of the entire point of this conversation. In my experience, which I would cautiously suggest on a professional level is greater than yours, in my experience it doesn't work. You can take the biggest racist in the country, pull his trousers down in a radio studio, humiliate him to the degree that he has to take out a full-page advert in the Daily Telegraph apologising, and none of his followers will move an inch.
I don't know, because when I speak to some of my friends who were hardcore leavers,
yes,
now, lots of conversations, lots of time down the road, they've changed their mind.
Oh, yeah, but being a hardcore leaver is not the same as being a half-wit and a high-visibility jacket. I talk to hardcore leavers every day, but talking to people who use violence and intimidation in a desperate bid to be noticed, that's a waste of time.
No, that's right, but... I still think, and I do agree with you. I know what you're saying, and I think I'm probably wrong, but I still think the way forward is to chip away, and narrow their margins, make them have fewer and fewer people who want to listen to them, show them up for the ridiculous ideas they have, and tear it down that way. I think when you go after them and call, we know what Boris Johnson is, but when you keep saying it, I think lots of his people double down and say, they're just having a go at him because he's a truth teller.
I wonder whether events need to play a bigger part in the conversation that we're having. So you keep calling it out, you keep describing it. You don't have to give these people the attention they crave, and events eventually will find them out, I mean, how many people have I argued with over the last year or two about what was going to happen at the ports in the event of a no-deal Brexit, or in the event of any Brexit that involves leaving the customs union or the single market? And nothing I've said has persuaded the people I was arguing with. Maybe I know that people who've been listening to the arguments have changed their minds. That's a distinction that's worth making, the distinction between people listening to the arguments and the person you're having the argument with. But now events are proving us right. People will be left with either the choice to admit that they were wrong, to accept that they were wrong, or to double down on the denial in a sort of John Redwood Owen Patterson style. 26 minutes after 10. I want to, if we can, keep the conversation not clear of Brexit, but by no means confined to Brexit, because the tradition of violent extremists getting far too much attention from the British media goes, for me, back to, in my living memory, it goes back to the Islamist fundamentalists. But then if I go back to my childhood, and you had Sinn Féin politicians who were the political wing of the IRA, they were put on... See, Margaret Thatcher, didn't she put them on the telly, but they had to use actors' voices? Do you know, for the first time in my life, I think I just suddenly glimpsed the reason why she did that. You can't ban them from the telly. You can't ban them from the radio, but they're elected politicians, so it's a slightly different proposition. John's in Wigan. John, what do you think?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I was talking to your producer, and what happened yesterday on my Facebook page, I saw Owen Jones being accosted by these people walking down Westminster, being roundly abused, and on the Facebook page, people genuinely supporting Owen for the way that he handled himself, which was admirable to say the least.
Yes.
The trolls obviously come onto the social media, and if you actually start to drill down to these people, the ones that are becoming abusive, and you dig deep enough, you find out that I don't think they actually really want the mainstream media publicity. I think they get their oxygen through the social media, because as soon as everything goes viral, it's out there, and they're getting their publicity that way.
They feed off each other, though. They don't. I mean, you know, I know the phones are there to record it for social media, but they're doing it when the real media cameras are pointed at these people. It's literally because they're doing interviews on College Green with reputable broadcasters that these half-wits in high-vis jackets turn up with their little phones, desperately trying to disrupt things and get their faces on the telly.
Yeah, I can accept that. I accept that.
Now, Omar Bakri Mohammed used to ring me. We get calls from hooligans and extremists on this programme who use pretend names to try to get onto the show. They're so desperate for the attention. Without the attention, they got nothing. And these days, of course, increasingly, they're passing the cap around their credulous followers, asking for money from people who can't afford to give it. And without some sense of endorsement from proper media, their income stream will dry up by tea time.
Yes, possibly. But I'm only speaking from what I saw yesterday on that social media.
Absolutely, and you only saw it from the Owen Jones end rather than the Anna Soubry end. Two people who, I mean, crikey, it feels like 10 minutes ago, they would have been absolutely no context in which you could imagine them being in the same category. Politically, they're diametrically opposed to each other, and yet, of course, that's what Brexit has done. It's broken everything.
But what was interesting, partly, James, was that obviously they were having a go at Owen Jones, these people, and Owen actually posted something on social media regarding a Tommy Robinson protest prior to Christmas.
Stephen Yaxley Lennon.
Yes, it balked at me using that name, to be honest, and how a poor turnout it was. You drill down further and further into the social media, and then you see videos and images which are clearly doctored to show a huge rally in support of Mr. Yaxley Lennon, a very peaceful one, and then they show you when 700,000 people protested.
But that's the point, you see. I think that endorses my point, which is you're thinking that by dealing with facts and truth, you can somehow converse or convert people who are consciously eschewing facts and truth. That's why they love Donald Trump. Alternative facts, fake news. It means you can paint your own reality and claim that your victimhood or your inadequacy is the fault of, I don't know, lesbians or Mexicans or Romanians.
Absolutely, I agree. I'm kind of on your side, and I'm probably not articulating myself.
Well, you are brilliant, making me think. That's all I can ask from my callers.
I think the only way that you can get to these people is partly agreeing with your first caller, is that you have to chip away and you have to expose them for the fools that they actually are.
But you can do that without talking to them. You don't. There's a great. I'm going to have lost it now. But Lisa just sent me a brilliant tweet, which I was toying with the idea of passing off as my own thought, but that would be very disreputable of me. Here you go. Putting light on the heat doesn't work anymore. You need to take the light away in the hope that the heat will dissipate over time.
Good point.
Isn't it? I like that a lot. In fact, I am going to pass that off as my own. That wasn't Lisa at all. That was me. John, thank you. I don't know if you agree, but my theory this morning is that the curious nature, the clashing, if you will, of social media and the concomitant struggle that traditional media has, the need to be popular, the chasing of ratings is as old as media itself, but something about social media has lasered in on that, the number of clicks. I caught myself becoming a little bit addicted. I got, this weekend, in fact, I got caught up over the last few days. I've had spats on Twitter, and this is an interesting hat trick of characters, all of whom I admire in different ways. I ended up having spats of sorts on Twitter with Owen Jones, Billy Bragg and Piers Morgan over the course of the last few days. And you do just occasionally catch yourself thinking, or tweeting something, not in the context of individual people, but if you're trying to criticise a group of people, I think I'm often guilty of using language that in retrospect I would regret. I'm trying to improve on that. Picking on, at the moment, people who can see no wrong in Jeremy Corbyn, and simultaneously people who persist in arguing that Brexit's going to be brilliant. They just can't tell us how yet. That they seem to me to be very similar levels of delusion. But you see how I've managed to say that there without actually being gratuitously offensive. If I call you all delusional bigots, like I did on Twitter the other day, then 24 hours later I look back and think, well, yeah, that's a little unfortunate. But here's the thing. If I didn't say delusional bigots on Twitter, I wouldn't get thousands and thousands and thousands of likes. And you catch yourself counting the likes. I'm putting this up as a mea culpa. I'm explaining that I fully understand how some of this can happen because I've fallen into these bear traps myself and still do and will no doubt continue to do so despite my best efforts. But you can make a point in a way that is intellectually identical but not insulting. Social media will amplify the insults. The tweet that doesn't actually offend, or offending people is not a problem. The gratuitous insult, if you can get a tweet to go around the world without a gratuitous insult in it, then you're a master of the craft. It's much, much easier to throw a hand grenade into the middle of social media and then sit back. So we can all be guilty of it. But I would also argue, of course, that you don't end up historically with a platform in the British media unless you've earned it. Whether you like the people who end up with them or not, you can't argue with the fact that they've put in the graft, they've put in the years. Unfortunately, we've ended up in a place now where you can get not so much a newspaper column, but you can certainly get a radio show or a season ticket on Question Time simply by being the chalk stripe suited version of the National Front. Heat, not light. Why are you booking him every week? Well, he gets a big reaction from the audience. He gets a big reaction from the audience because racism is going back into the mainstream, and people who are frightened and angry about that are also going to respond very vocally. Yeah, but look at the numbers. Look how many tweets there were about last night's show, and we're all guilty of that. But the question this morning is, how do we deal with the latest incarnation of violent extremists desperately seeking attention? Do we fall into the trap we fell in with Anjem Choudhury and his mates, or the EDL, all of the other kind of extremist and potentially violent organisations that the media felt, oh yeah, it's probably a bit irresponsible of us, but just count those clicks, Tristram, count those clicks. I don't know. Tom's in Ramsgate, appropriately enough. Tom, are you involved in the dredging process?
No, I'm not, I'm afraid.
Well, get out there, mate. Seriously, there's money to be made. You could have made 540 quid yesterday if you nicked a bin lorry.
Oh, I'll get me a ticket now. I just want to say that I know what at the beginning you were saying that the fact that you didn't think that it worked, that you've tried talking to people,
yes,
and basically shouting down the fact, not shouting down, but saying that it doesn't work. But I do believe that it actually does. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you a prime example, if I can talk it from my point of view. In 2015, I live in Ramsgate.
Yes.
UKIP was on the rise, and they nearly got in, obviously, if it wasn't for, obviously, the Conservatives and Craig McKinley winning. But in 2014, I think it was, you interviewed a certain person who was the leadership of that person,
yes,
of UKIP, and you shut him down. You made some very, very good arguments. If it wasn't for me watching that video, I must admit I might have voted differently. So it does actually work. And I know, obviously, I'm giving you anecdotal evidence.
It's not anecdotal. It's you. It's one. But if you look at some of that, and it's a while since I've done this, but if you look at the some of the comments on YouTube under that interview, you'll see the evidence of my position, which is people can't be reasoned out of a position they haven't been reasoned into. So I guess we're both a bit right on that one.
Yeah, but I just think that you have to, what you're saying about the fact that you don't want to give these people the platform because you know that it won't work because they're their own echo chamber. But
also, I have to choose my words carefully here, Tom, because obviously I have great respect for all of my colleagues except the one that you mentioned, whether they're on air or not on air. I completely destroyed the man in public, and he ended up working here, so it didn't go that well.
Yeah, I know, but it's just I still believe that the fact that these people will never go away, and they can always have these opinions, and you need people to challenge them on it. And it's like you said it before. I don't know if you said it, but freedom of speech does not go without freedom of critique, and you have to be able to sort of say it to these people that they don't have carte blanche, they don't own the principle on freedom of speech. You have to be able to criticise what they say, and the only way to do that is to give them a platform.
Yes, I can see the wisdom in what you say, and your own case study is compelling evidence for your position. And I'm not going to argue with you because I don't think I've got the arguments to succeed. I just have my own instincts now and my professional experiences, which generally tell me that it doesn't work or not on a sufficient scale to justify the practice. But it worked on you, so you're always going to come back and trump me on that one. Thank you, Tom. Are you interested in joining the board of Superships?
I don't know. I was thinking about setting up my own company. I haven't got anything yet at the moment, but it's I never know. But
hang in there. If you need any advice on setting up a shipping company, then just let me know. Or go to superships.co.uk, where I'm delighted to announce I was promoted this morning. I'm now an admiral or something. 10:42 is the time. Ali is in Slough. Ali, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, looking at the specific issue from yesterday, thugs going around insulting people and bullying people, it struck me that Brexit, specifically first, and I've got a general point too, was a masterclass in deception, dishonesty and innuendo by both sides. So, as it's a quote attributed to Churchill, whether it's true or not, is that the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with your average voter, i.e. these people have been groomed by people like Johnson, Farage on this side of the argument,
yes,
and people like Cameron and Osborne also lied through their teeth. So the people have been groomed into
not knowingly. They made predictions that. I really struggle with this line, and I apologise for interrupting you, but the predictions that were made by the Remain side were precisely the scenarios that Mark Carney and others moved immediately to prevent happening in the aftermath of the result coming in. So, listen, I'm never, ever going to defend George Osborne or David Cameron in any context whatsoever, particularly Cameron, an utterly repugnant politician. I'm sure he's a lovely man. But look, but the predictions, the so-called Project Fear, the people, the grown-ups like Mark Carney and others, actively and passionately work to make their own predictions not come true. And then when some of them didn't come true, you turn around and accuse them of having lied through their teeth. I just feel that's a little unfair and possibly part of the problem you're seeking to describe. The other people you mentioned, chancers and snake oil salesmen all. Yes, of course you can.
Well, the issue here is that when the average person that you're dealing with has bought two sides of an argument which were not accurately and fairly presented, let's go to middle ground.
Okay.
Then these people that go out there and start bullying and insulting everybody are merely echoing the wider political culture that has brought us to this cliff edge that we are fast approaching. That's to do with Brexit. And the majority of politicians may well go into politics with sincere intentions. But over the last 10, 15 years you've talked about, look at the honesty ratings of many of them. There's expensive scandal. There's a scandal every other week. I'm not saying people come into politics with insincere intentions.
Keith Vaz is still in the House of Commons. It's always an interesting aside at moments like this.
And a broader point, which I was going to say, with hate-mongering and fear-mongering, you look at the way that the main, as you said, the chalk-stripe, plum-accented politicians, they've been leading on all of the issues that you've mentioned, racism, hatred of other minorities, etc. What has happened is the media has echoed it. The Daily Fail is notorious for this sort of...
under the last editor, it is moving towards the light at the moment. Again, I find myself in the odd role of being the voice of caution during your call to this program.
I mean, you have to do what you've got to do, but the issue comes down to this. Politics and the values that it's being imbuing in the public are failing, and it's alarming, not in Britain, across Europe.
Yes, extremism is on the rise, but for the same reason. And it is scapegoating. It's as old as the hills. Whether you're talking about Viktor Orban or Donald Trump, someone stands up in public, says your life's not great. If you're of a right-wing disposition, you can't contemplate the possibility that these people you've been voting for all your life have been filling their pockets while laughing at you. So you have to turn around and blame Jews or Muslims or Romanians or Mexicans or whoever it may be, and that's why they get away with murder, metaphorically speaking, for now.
Literally.
Well, I was going to say in some cases.
Well, regrettably.
Here's another point. All right, if you have a, quotes, public figure, end quotes, saying in public that he would pick up a rifle and head to the front lines if Brexit doesn't happen, how much right do you then have to condemn these half-wits in high-visibility vests for being verbally violent on College Green? It seems to me that if a man can get away with that kind of incitement, that kind of verbal violence, because he's got a chalk-striped suit, yellow teeth and a plummy accent, then you can't really go after the people on College Green who have slightly more estuarine accents and less articulate abilities.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you think it through, when the people that decide, I mean, look, ultimately, freedom of speech comes with a right of critique, but not to insult. But when you encourage people by caricatures, and that's what mainly this sort of argument really runs, when you don't like a group of people, you'll caricature them in a way, rather like the Nazis were doing of Jews in the 1930s. The media was front line. It's not very novel.
Yeah, I would again draw the distinction between the characteristics over which you have no control, like your circumstances of your birth, your ethnicity, the religion of your parents, or the characteristics over which you do have control, like ignorance and knowledge and intelligence and niceness and nastiness. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of it about. And of course, the false equivalence kicks in again. So you'll have somebody claiming that calling screaming Nazi at Anna Soubry on College Green is the same as calling somebody who's not very bright but furiously convinced of their own rectitude, calling them gammon. There's no comparison whatsoever, no equivalence on the planet. One is rude, and the other is dangerous. It's 10:48. I suppose in the interests of endorsing my own theory that we should point and laugh at these inadequates instead of doing what we did with Anjem Choudhury and his mates and turning them into figures of terror and fear, we should point out that when some of these characters started screaming the word Nazi at Anna Soubry, looking at their belief systems, it could have been construed as a compliment, couldn't it? Theo Usherwood spends a lot of time down on Parliament Green. Are you all right?
I'm fine.
Carry on.
Thank you. The Met Police have just issued a statement, James, saying that they are continuing to assess whether any crimes are being committed following what happened to Anna Soubry yesterday. It was reported by somebody, well, not Anna Soubry, and of course, if a crime has been committed, it will be fully investigated, according to the Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Lawrence Taylor. Very defensive, in fact, from the Met, James. There's been a lot of criticism that the police haven't put forward an adequate response, because when Anna Soubry walked into the Lord's car park entrance of the Palace of Westminster, there is in fact a sentry point for a police officer right there. Now, instead of that officer or other officers, and there are also two armed officers at that point, coming forward and protecting Anna Soubry, the MP for Broxtowe, from those yellow vest protesters, she had to fend her way through the crowd to get into the Palace of Westminster and therefore find sanctuary.
I feel sorry for the police. I know that's a desperately unfashionable thing to say. Not only have they been cut to the quick by almost a decade now of cuts to their services while getting it in the neck for a failure to do their job as well as they used to do. I always think of that Police Federation conference where the bloke stood up and predicted to the then Home Secretary Theresa May pretty much exactly what has subsequently happened, but somehow it's not Theresa May's fault. They have to make a judgment call on this, because there's plenty of peaceful protests down on College Green. You've got old Steve with his inflatable boats and his comedy poles, and then you've got these half-wits in high-visibility vests, and an ordinary police officer's job doesn't necessarily entail making these distinctions. You know, the public struggle to understand the difference between a peaceful protest and a violent one.
2 points. When I was down there, one of the officers had actually been given what was entitled an aid memoir.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Crikey, it's almost like I'm talking sense.
Piece of paper which was said where they could intervene with legal and proportionate force. That was the quote. The other risk they have is turning these yellow vests, well, they're yobs, aren't they, into martyrs.
Yeah, well, yes.
And I was told by somebody down there who was a part of a... You can't really compare the two because it was a counter-demonstration.
Nothing proves your Euroscepticism like copying French hooligans.
But they're desperate to be arrested.
Of course they are.
They're desperate for the television cameras to see them carted off in the back of a police van because then they become martyrs.
They've seen what other professional hooligans can do with a crowdfunding page, haven't they? And they're asking the poor saps and the credulous fools to send them money because they keep arresting me for doing crimes.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's where we are.
Theo, always a pleasure. Happy New Year. Are we going to see a lot of you this year, do you think? Or do you think the political landscape will be quite calm?
Just quiet.
It's going to be quiet. It's going to be quiet. It'll be like
2013.
It'll be like a glassy lake. Going back. Do you know what I look back fondly on? You're too young to remember this. The Cones hotline.
Cones hotline?
You've no idea what I'm talking about. In fact, glancing around the team today, only Jones the engineer would remember the Cones hotline. When John Major was Prime Minister, he had enough time on his hands to come up with a Cones hotline, which was, if you were driving up the motorway and you saw too many traffic cones, there was a number you could ring to find out.
And there wasn't enough people out
doing any road work. So you could ring the Cones hotline. Take me back to the days of the Cones hotline, Theo.
It won't be a Cones hotline kind of year.
Martin's in Portsmouth. Martin, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hello. I'd like to say that you're probably making the wrong choice to discredit these people quite so roundly and insult them quite so much.
The people screaming Nazi at Anna Soubry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically...
So explain their position then. Defend their position, if you will.
I'm not going to defend their position.
You said I'm wrong to attack it.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is say that they are people who've got nothing to lose. They're the kind of people who are rent a mob. However,
I agree with you.
In some cases, they're expressing views and opinions that people like myself who can't make that kind of protest because of our jobs, because of what we've got to lose.
Yes.
They're doing it for us.
So you think Anna Soubry is a Nazi?
I don't like Anna Soubry one little bit. But
that's not what I asked. So what are the views they're expressing that you agree with but feel you can't personally articulate?
I think she's corrupt. I think like all our government is corrupt. All our politicians are self-serving.
There you go. You've just said that to more people than those half-wits in high visibility vests can ever dream of addressing.
And what the biased media is doing is grabbing these individuals.
Are you far right or Corbynite?
I'm neither.
Oh, of course you're not. No, but the biased media. Go on.
You are, yeah. You're
talking
biased.
to the biased media at the moment, are you?
Yeah, finally.
How does that work?
For weeks.
Well, I've got a very busy show. It's quite hard to get through. So how am I expressing my bias now?
You flip from one thing to another, whatever you think is going to create the best show for you.
That's the opposite of bias, Martin.
But what I'm seeing is most of the media is somehow anti-Brexit. Everything's such a bad idea.
So the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Express, the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Daily Star, all anti-Brexit, are they?
Well, here's what happens, all right?
Yeah, go on.
I'm going to get on to what I wanted to talk about, which is
hang on, you have
individuals...
This is the biased media.
Yeah, and what I see from the biased media is individuals picked out of a crowd. You get a little soundbite from them, which is completely inane, and it completely devalues whatever protest they're making.
But that's their fault for being inane.
Yeah, but they're the kind of people who've got nothing to lose and will go to these protests.
And they speak for you.
Who can articulate. No, they don't.
When you find someone who can articulate, give them my number.
Yeah, well... I can articulate.
Go on then.
Right, but okay, let's look at Brexit, because I know you said you didn't want to get on to or stay on the topic. The reason the EU was formed in the first place was to ensure that there wouldn't be war in Europe again. The French agricultural economy was linked to the German industrial economy, and they became reliant on each other. The fact that the French agricultural economy is inefficient and ours isn't has meant that we've had heavy EU tariffs put on our stuff and restrictions.
Why does the NFU describe leaving with no deal as a catastrophe?
Because they're so used to the handouts.
Oh, OK. And this is what you think the people in the high visibility vests on Parliament Green really want to talk about, but they instead get corralled by biased media into calling Anna Soubry a Nazi.
They also want to talk about immigration control, and I know that the laws have been in place to control our borders.
We haven't talked about anything except immigration for the last 20 years in this country.
I know, and it's because of our political system, the party political system, and the way it's so open to corruption that we haven't... So
are there any politicians that aren't corrupt?
Not that I can think of at the moment in Parliament, no. And the reason for that...
Are there any corners of the media that aren't biased?
I haven't found one.
No.
Honestly, every time I watch the media, all I can see is propaganda from one side or another.
Because they're not properly pointing out that the European Union is a... Go on, give me your favourite phrase.
Well, it's a club that doesn't really want us as a member, but wants our money.
Yes, but anybody who says different to that is indulging in propaganda. Martin, you're a genius. If I were you, I'd spend some of your pocket money on a high-visibility vest, because you're doing yourself down when you suggest that you couldn't stand alongside them and fit right in.